Hi, Sandra Wilson here, clinical hypnotherapist. Now, do you ever feel like your emotions are just too big, too overwhelming, and it just doesn't feel comfortable? And you might notice symptoms like really extreme anger, for example, just coming on completely without warning over something that you might consider actually is fairly minor. Or you might feel uncomfortable about a situation in your life and just not really be able to figure out why, but all you know is it feels very, very unpleasant and you try to navigate or control or avoid that situation. Sometimes you might feel guilty or ashamed, particularly if you are struggling with being able to cope with your life. You might have a lot on your plate or be in difficult relationships or situations in your working life, and maybe this feeling of not being able to cope with them or manage them, which is a particularly strong feature of ADHD. The feelings of shame will be lurking in the background, and that can actually feel really unpleasant. And do you ever get told, or were you ever told, you're just too sensitive, that you overreact to things, that you're quick to get upset? You might notice that you cry a lot, especially over things that other people might not necessarily cry about. This is what we call emotional dysregulation, when your emotions feel overwhelming, just too big, too complex, or just too much. So they're too much to handle. And I guess a part of it is really not being able to understand what the emotion is telling you, because you're lost in the overwhelming feeling of it. And it's not so much that you don't have emotional intelligence or an ability to understand the emotion. It's just that it comes over you in such a huge tidal wave that you get very swept up in it, and it can be very, very difficult to figure out exactly what the problem is and what you're going to do about it, logically, applying logic. And it's really something that is just so common with a lot of people with chronic anxiety, people who've been through a lot of trauma in their lives, or people that may have ADHD. And I'm quite interested in, I guess, the intersection between ADHD and trauma, even though one doesn't necessarily mean you have the other, because they're two very separate things. Sometimes the symptoms of ADHD, chronic anxiety and trauma can be very similar, and how you understand and regulate your emotions can be a big part of that. Now, I don't know whether you would ever really consider getting help for this, but therapy can be incredibly helpful at helping you to not only understand your emotions and figure out what they're trying to tell you, but to be able to cope better with them. Because what we tend to do is we feel an emotion that isn't particularly pleasant and we stuff it down. We distract ourselves from it and we pretend it's not there. And whilst distraction isn't necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes it's quite nice to just try and pull yourself out of feeling a bit crappy, if you're not acknowledging your emotions and you're suppressing them, in the long run it can just make things worse. So if you have been having problems with feeling overwhelmed, that emotions are too big, you're losing your temper a lot, you feel guilty or ashamed or sad a lot of the time, anxious, and it's affecting your day-to-day life, do reach out for help, because this is not something that's permanent. No matter what the underlying cause is, therapy can be very helpful. So if that resonates with anybody out there, do let me know what you think. What emotion do you struggle with the most? And do you even recognise what that emotion is and what it's trying to tell you? I'll be back tomorrow with more content. Bye for now.